Hello, and welcome to another fully live Friday episode of Hacking with Friends. My name is Cody Kinsey. I am a security researcher at Varonis, and today, per usual, we have my friend and fellow hacker Alex here to help us go through the cybersecurity news of the week. And yeah, we've also been up to a lot, so we're going to be going over a little bit about what we have been working on. So Alex, how's your week been? What have you been up to?
It's been a pretty stressful week with keeping up with all the packaging for the Wi-Fi Nugget. We've been ramping up our production so we can prepare for our first order to hack 5 of about 250 Wi-Fi nuggets. So I've been working on the final version of the Rubber Nugget firmware, as well as packaging a whole ton of orders and everything else involved with that, like making shipping labels, designing custom printing sheets and stuff like that.
Yeah, if you switch over to my screen, you can see exactly what Alex is talking about. So if you've never heard of it, the Wi-Fi Nugget is a platform that was actually created by Alex. It is a hardware platform that allows you to easily learn about cybersecurity and hacking. And the first project that we're putting out is the Rubber Nugget. So you can see the screen right here. It allows you to deploy Ducky script payloads in 3 clicks or less. And it right now can let you do that for, I think, 36 payloads.
Yeah.
But of course, if you use the web interface, then you can use as many as you want. So really, really cool. Making them has been very stressful. And as you can see, we have this new design that Alex did that is purple and orange, which I believe is a sports team unintentionally. So if you like that sports team, boy, do we have an unintentional combo for you.
We love sports, don't we?
We sure do. But yeah, it's nice to see these nuggets on the march. We have lots of these going out, and they will be in the Hack5 store probably in a couple weeks, because there's a couple other Hack5 tools that are coming out, like the update to the Pineapple and stuff. So we don't want to steal anyone's thunder. So stay tuned for more information about that. But yeah, been quite a week for you, packaging and doing all this nugget stuff.
We also do have a split in colors. We have the Goth Nugget, which is just an all black case, and then we have this one, which is my personal favorite. It's color changing. So the purple goes from purple to pink.
I personally like the Goth Nuggets. I think the way they came out is really nice. But we've also randomly, I printed a bunch of cases in white and made these like Stormtrooper Nuggets that were just prototype only. And I was like, all right, now I'll know to never ship these out by accident because they'll be white. And someone saw them in one of our videos and specifically demanded it. And now we have a bunch of people asking for white, like white Stormtrooper Nuggets. Yeah. So yeah, if you have a color preference or if you want to see a color, let us know, because we're also looking at doing some interesting case design stuff in the next month or 2.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's been really fun.
Oh, I think I actually have the black and white nugget.
Oh yeah, if we switch to Alex's screen, you can see what the Stormtrooper Nugget looks like that somebody specifically demanded rather than a normal nugget.
It's a serendipitous success. Yeah, let's see. 13 people want this nugget. And only one person has this special nugget so far.
Yeah, so another thing to note is actually the fact that we did our first release of the Rubber Nugget Arduino software. So you could probably explain a little better than I could.
Yeah, so there's a lot that's been going on in terms of features that we had to negotiate for what we wanted included in the first interface, since there was just so much to pack into there. So for the Rubber Nugget interface, we settled on this design that allows you to quickly deploy payloads in just 3 clicks. So the interface lets you select the payload, operating system type, then a subcategory, and then the payload itself. So the way this works is you can just go ahead and plug this nugget into your computer. You can upload payloads over USB, which are Ducky script payloads. So basically any existing Rubber Ducky or Bash Bunny payload will work on your Rubber Nugget. So you can just upload these via USB like a flash drive. And then you can use the on-screen interface to deploy these payloads just by selecting them. Oh, you guys can't see my screen. Well, if you want to switch over real quick. I wish I had a demo pulled up. But yeah, you can see there's on-screen prompts that will show you the subcategory as well as the operating system and further directory traversal, so you can see what exactly you're selecting by using the buttons and the screen on the Wi-Fi Nugget. And you can also program aliases for reactive feedback, so you can get custom cat graphics and LED feedback based on the progress of your payload, as well as being able to monitor it through text on the screen. And also in addition to that, we also programmed a web interface, so that way you can control your Wi-Fi Nugget over Wi-Fi. So that allows you to create, edit, and run payloads from a web browser.
Yeah, and by we, you mean you.
Yeah, I think that's right. Well, you helped make a lot of the decisions that went into this first iteration.
Yeah, it's just pretty incredible to me that like the hardware design on this and that cute little nugget that's drawn on the screen, plus the software that it's running in, were all made by Alex. So
yeah,
really, really cool. If you want to try this out and you have a Wi-Fi nugget, or if you have a ESP32 S2 based board, you won't be able to see the cute cat stuff, but you would be able to test out some of the other features. If you switch over to my screen, you can see that this is now public. The code is open source, and it's got 10 issues. So we've got a couple weeks to get those down to 0, hopefully. But if you want to try out this very early version of a really cool new piece of software on your Wi-Fi nugget, if you have one, then feel free to play around with this, leave us feedback, and if you find any issues, feel free to drop them, because boy, do we love company on these issues.
Hey, most of these are you.
Most of these are me. They're almost all me,
good.
but we have one from someone who tested it out. So if you want to drop some issues, please let us know. All right, moving on. So over on my screen, you can see many Michaels. In fact, look at this. It's all these Michaels working at Michaels Power Inc. And it seems as though they're in charge of generating some sort of electricity. If you want to learn what happens to all these Michaels in just a couple seconds, you're going to have to go to Watch Hackers Destroy Industrial Systems with Code, which is the video we just released on Hack5 yesterday. So this was a lot of fun to shoot. Alex and I basically created and then destroyed a Wi-Fi controlled centrifuge in order to show off how a hacker might be able to attack a system and send a command that would actually destroy a piece of hardware. So obviously we had to simplify things a little bit in order for it to fit into like 10 minutes. So if you want to learn a little bit more about doing some of the intrusion techniques that I showed off, like brute forcing stay logged in cookies, then I do go into that in the links here.
Someone asks why the background looks a little fake.
Oh, the background here? Weird. Why would, I mean, we set up this, 5-ton centrifuge in our garage.
We took a tour of this facility here, this centrifuge facility.
Yeah, we'll have to give you a tour sometimes. Uh-oh, that doesn't look good. Oh, no, what's going to happen? So, long story short, we do I'm sorry, I can't. Sorry, this video is great, but we do successfully destroy the centrifuge. It successfully fails, as some might say. And we were able to document its destruction and how something that was really depending on spinning a certain speed might be coerced into, in this case, destroying its own power supply by failing dramatically. So I also get to do this on camera. So guess what, everyone? Look at this. Look at how many likes it has. Oh, hooray!
Nice.
Yeah, cool. All right. So anyway, I'm actually a little disappointed because a couple people joined since. It was going to be six, but now that's fine too. But yeah, so we have lots of great comments on this. Some people pointing out that I apparently don't know how to say nuclear. So that's great.
How do you say it?
I just said it.
That sounds fine to me.
Yeah, all right.
Weird.
And then other people insisting that I am not Darren Kitchen, which is still our most popular comment. All right, so moving on from the content stuff of the week, let's go over some interesting hardware stuff. So we've talked about microcontrollers that can be used for all sorts of interesting cybersecurity stuff and also maker stuff on the show a lot. And we've got another one. So the ESP32 S3 is the one that I meant to be on, which you can also check out on ESP32S3.com, is a really interesting, this relies on JavaScript, is a really interesting microcontroller that is kind of the new flagship of Espressif. And a lot of these that have been coming out that we've been using, like the S2, just lack a little bit of something. Like, for example, the S2 is a really interesting board, but it doesn't have some of the features that the ESP32 S3 has. So in particular, it doesn't have Bluetooth. And that is something that is a really cool peripheral to have if you want to be able to link to something like, I don't know, a speaker or a control system or an app on your phone to control this thing while it's doing Wi-Fi stuff and it's doing maybe human interface device stuff. It just adds like a lot that you can do on this. And I was actually hoping for a comparison versus the S2. But another thing is, and I know that you, I think, all right, so the S2 is supposed to have like a single core plus like a helper core or something. And I know that you've worked with it before and insisted it was dual core. So I'm not going to challenge you on that. But this one is truly dual core and it's a lot faster. And it has some additional like low power processors that are like little like helper processors that you can also use for stuff. And most importantly, I believe I addressed this here. it has things like AI built into it, or machine learning models built into it, including a cat face detection system. I'm not making this up. So
that's a feature that everything needs to have on it.
Exactly. So this actually innately will allow you to program in applications that do cat face detection. I'm not making that up. That was a primary focus of the developers, was to include this model. And of course, they have other stuff like human face recognition, human face detection, color detection, and hand pose recognition. But who wants any of that stuff? Really, it's all about the cat face detection. And it is important to kind of draw the line here. If you think that means it's going to recognize and let your cat in versus other cats, that is not, it's not what this means. It means that it can detect a cat's face, not that it can distinguish between cats. That would be cat face recognition. So don't get too wildly excited. I do want to put this in perspective, but I was amazed to see that this brand new microcontroller does in fact support cat face recognition right out of the box, essentially.
So it can just tell cat or not cat, but it
yeah,
can't
exactly.
distinguish between cats,
So
right?
you could make something that lets your cat in, but not a raccoon. To go get some food. However, if your cat brought in its friend cats, then it wouldn't be able to tell the difference. That's kind of the ability there. So anyway, so this is, I ended up picking one of these up, and we just got, I think it was the Tiny S3. And this
Didn't we get both actually?
So I got a design by Adafruit, so it's not this
okay.
one exactly. This one is actually sweet, but the lead time on it was crazy because it comes from Australia. And these are by Unexpected Maker. I honestly had heard of their boards before, but I hadn't really tried any of them out. And then I just got a couple in, and I have to say they're pretty impressive and cool, and I really like the design. So a lot of these have applications, again, for cybersecurity. Like imagine like a Bluetooth USB rubber ducky that also does Wi-Fi stuff, or there's lots of different possibilities you can do here when you have full access to a speedy little microcontroller that has Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and built-in USB. So all these things seem really cool. It currently supports CircuitPython, MicroPython, Arduino. It's really awesome. So I'm going to be playing with this a little bit more. It is really super brand new. It's only pretty recently that you can even get these. So we've been messing around with the ESP32 S2, and we've really liked it. So we're excited to try this out too and see what other possibilities it brings. Very, very cool and interesting.
One thing I can think of that's missing from the current platform, Bluetooth would be useful for being able to do stuff like geofencing. There's already existing payloads for that on the Bash Bunny, which I thought was really interesting. Of course, there's the possibility to do Wi-Fi geofencing, so you can detect a device by its MAC address or something like that. But if a device has MAC randomization, that wouldn't be as effective, I would suppose. But
which is super common.
Yeah. I don't think Bluetooth devices really do that.
They can, but for whatever reason, they do not. So your headphones, police's like body cameras, like all those different things have Bluetooth, but they don't randomize it. So that means you can either kind of go war driving for people's devices, like car stereos, like Bluetooth car stereos. They don't change their MAC address very often, or if ever. So there's actually a lot of interesting stuff you can do with Bluetooth sniffing and identifying and geofencing, like you said by that.
Yeah. Yeah, so essentially you can trigger payloads based off the presence or the lack of person around.
Oh yeah, like make a payload only run when someone's headphones go away.
Yeah.
So they don't see it on their computer. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's super cool. So we'll be telling you more about this as we learn more about it, but it was just really cool to see information about it. And so yeah, I picked one up. I found them pretty easy to work with so far, and I'm very interested in learning more about them. So all right, so now I have to shout out a friend of mine who came up with an ingenious solution to a problem. So over here, you can see an example of hosting a QR code on a Wi-Fi Nugget, or really any small display. So let's say that I want somebody to be able to set something up very quickly. Well, if I don't want them typing in some long URL that they might end up messing up, I can give them a QR code, which their phone will scan and automatically take them to the configuration page that allows them to set up whatever thing it is I'm trying to set up. So in this example, I'm trying to make a Wi-Fi honeypot, something that will connect to your Wi-Fi network and then sit there and in order to detect when someone starts scanning around your network and accessing things, thinking that they might be something juicy to log into. So this is, maybe like a roommate who has gotten on the network and is poking around, or a neighbor that's gotten access to your Wi-Fi by brute forcing your password or something and starts trying to log into stuff. This would be kind of a first detection method. But the problem is we were using canary tokens, which is a really easy and free way to quickly get set up with a detection mechanism. But the URL was just too long to fit into this tiny little QR code. And the way that QR codes work, the next version up can't effectively be scaled on this tiny screen. meaning that we couldn't actually let users use a QR code to go over to the configuration page and see whether or not, someone has broken into their network or what's going on with it. So that was pretty disappointing until a friend of mine, Arsenis, came up with an amazing idea. So he decided that it would be a good idea to actually create a shortening service on this device itself. So just the same way that like Bitly or something will take a longer URL and shorten it, this does the same thing on the Wi-Fi Nugget. So on the little ESP32 S2 based microcontroller, it's able to host its own URL shortening service. So Arsenis went ahead and wrote this ingenious Python code, which allows you to take a token, and I've obfuscated this. This is not the real token, but allows you to take a token that's way too long to effectively be fit, and instead pop up this short little URL and then turn it into a QR code. So what it looks like is you connect to the same Wi-Fi network, you scan the QR code, and it will automatically forward you on to this much longer link that isn't able to actually fit on the QR code. So I just thought that was so ingenious. The fact that you can actually forward someone to any length of URL, even if it won't fit in a QR code, by hosting a little server on this microcontroller, which will do the work for you. So originally we thought like, oh, we're gonna have to buy AWS space and we're gonna have to pop this thing up as an external server. No, you can actually run this on a little microcontroller. So of course this has applications for like phishing users and doing other sorts of things as well, sure. But it means you can also effectively, as a creator, guide users in like installation processes or to documentation with a tiny little QR code instead of a really big one, which might be required to hold more data. So shout out to Arsenis for making an incredible workaround for this technical problem that allows easier setup for users doing microcontroller stuff. All right, let's get into some more news. Actually, just a shout out to myself. If you haven't checked out the How Hackers Phish Windows Users for Cheap with SSDP, Simple Service Discovery Protocol, check it out. This video is doing pretty well on Hack5 and has gotten some great feedback from users. So if you're interested in using this kind of obscure protocol to create fake devices on a network that can be discovered by Windows computers, they just kind of pop up and potentially phish them. Really interesting attack. I'm trying to kind of turn this into more of like a scenario where someone would use this as like a phishing lure bait. But yeah, really interesting protocol. Had no idea it would be so easy to create. I believe the name of the device was Toilet Cam, because if you see that pop up on your network, you want to be like, what is this? What is this? So yeah, and Alex gets a big shout out as well for creating a little phishing page that actually shows the password on the screen of the Wi-Fi Nugget when the victim types it in. So of course, phishing page is not supposed to look realistic, and it does not look realistic. So don't expect to phish anyone with it.
Yeah.
Okay, so top alert. If you're on a computer right now, shut it down. According to Austin P. State University. This tweet went out yesterday, and I immediately shut down my computer before I read some subsequent tweets, which went on to state this was only if you were connected to their network. So it looks as though they panicked a little bit when they were hit by a cyber attack yesterday. So that ransomware attack caused them to frantically tweet out, this is not a test, shut down all computers now. And then we are under a ransomware attack. If your computer is connected to the APSU network, please disconnect it immediately. I mean, it's better to be cautious. Typically, a business would be like, we are experiencing technical difficulties and are investigating the claims behind these issues. However, they wouldn't just shout in all caps that you need to shut down all computers now.
It's straightforward. It gets to the point.
I actually like this is the thing. Because most companies like, no, we don't know the extent. We don't think that it's ransomware. We just think we've lost access to some files. No, this university was very transparent about their level of panic during the initial stages of this cyber attack. So I do feel very bad for them, but also this resonated across the entire kind of InfoSec Twitter as something that we've never really seen before from the victim of a cyber attack.
Just a panic response.
Exactly,
like
exactly. So yeah, this was pretty crazy, and I was interested to see what exactly had happened. It looks like they are now in crisis mode. They've stood up a bunch of alternative services for students to log into, but they have put out a notification of the breach. I have to say, in spite of in spite of the absolutely panicked like plea to all of Twitter to shut down every computer, I do admire the transparency and how quickly they were able to turn this around and make sure everybody was aware of what had happened and to try to mitigate the damage. Obviously,
these cops look serious about it.
They're so upset. Everybody's upset. It's funny also that they're kind of standing in front of the building like they're like don't even come inside. There's a ransomware inside there. It could get you. Again, great, like super high marks for transparency. In terms of like professionalism for communication, you know what? It's an emergency. I'm not even going to give them a score because I wasn't there. So maybe it really is that bad. But either way, it's just another example of how a lot of these higher education institutions are being targeted by cyber attacks, and often they don't have the experience to know the appropriate way to respond to that, as potentially evidenced by this case.
Better than just shutting up and pretending like there's nothing wrong, I suppose. I'd rather.
That's what I'm saying. I have to admire this. They're straight shooters over there. Like that's one thing I can definitely take away from this.
Nice.
All right, Alex, how about you?
Cool. Just to circle back around to your QR thing, since I know you were pretty interested in that.
Crazy
for a while.
For QRs.
Yeah. You're QR crazed. Yeah. So I don't know if you saw that these have been circling around Twitter now, these animated GIFs of QR codes that are actually scannable, but I thought these were pretty interesting. I didn't get to read too much into the technical documents on them, but from what I understand, the premise is that certain parts of QR codes can be obstructed and still operate, since there's different sectors of a QR code that actually encode the information, and lots of the QR code compensates for error, whether that's the QR code being physically obstructed or if it's like misscanned or like blurry or something like that. But someone made an algorithm that basically allows you to just dump a GIF into a QR code and have it still redirect to a link by detecting like which of these sectors can be manipulated. Also, I don't know if that GIF is actually buffering on our screen over there. But
yeah, it's oh yeah, a little bit. It's moving a little bit.
Yeah, but I thought this was really interesting, and maybe you might want to look into this. But you can also check out this website, which I thought was pretty cool, qrpicture.com. But this allows you to create animated QR codes.
That's
based
super
off
cool.
This premise, yeah.
Yeah. So in most standards of QR code, depending on the level of error correction that is set, you can have as much as 30% of the QR code be destroyed and have it still be perfectly functional. So that allows you to do things like little animations, or just literally have something stuck in the middle, like a brand name. Or, I mean, as it was designed, if you put this on the outside of a box or something and it gets scraped and damaged in transit or bleached out or whatever, then it's still, unless the entire thing is really destroyed, 30% can be just ruined, and it could still work. And you can test that by just holding your finger over parts of a QR code, and you can cover up like a third of it, and it still just seems to work. So that's why these are pretty cool. I guess a little less than a third, but yeah, they're so pretty cool and enable you to do things like these animations where,
you can also see a damaged QR code.
Is this comparison where they like try to destroy QR codes in different ways and see if it works or not?
They briefly talk about that. They just show like pasting images over it. You can see this one that's just like ripped in half, and then also this one that just has a GIF pasted over it.
Yeah, there's this amazing like kind of study on QR codes where this person just tries to destroy it in different ways and records whether or not it actually knocks it out. And there's a couple things that will knock out a QR code. My favorite is if you remove the separation in those squares. So for example, if you join the square, like moving the mouse right there, if you join that part of the square against like a black background so it can't distinguish it, totally impossible to read the QR code because it can't get those black squares, so it doesn't know where any of the code is. So
yeah, that's for like orienting it, right?
Exactly.
From what I understand, there's different parts, like these 3 squares on the corners are for orienting it. There's like data blocks that tell it what kind of QR code it is, and then the data itself.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's a couple blocks below the squares where if you were to color those in with a pen, it would destroy the information it uses to identify what type of QR code it is. And at that point, it can't read it any further because it doesn't know what the data is, or it isn't sure. So yeah, my interest was in kind of trying to damage QR codes to the point you could either flip them to another QR code or to just destroy them in the most expedient way possible, because they are really resistant actually to destruction. And that's why it's possible to do these sorts of animations on them.
Yeah.
All right, so over on my screen, we have a new security standard, or at least something that is being included in security standards, which is the security.txt file. So do you know what a robots.txt file is?
Yeah, that's usually That's usually a file that's hosted on web servers that are serving like websites or whatever that tell scrapers or robots that are attempting to basically profile the website what folders or directories they're not allowed to look into.
Yeah, exactly. So they don't index certain things. And this is actually supposed to be something that allows anybody who is doing security research on a website to contact the right people. You would not believe how many times I'm on security Twitter and I'll just see, does anybody know how to get in touch with the Danish civil defense department? Like, because I have to tell them something. And like all the other security researchers are like, oh, wow, that sounds bad. And then like, somebody who works over there will eventually get them in touch. So these sorts of things are really, really common. And it is a problem because theoretically somebody could pop up a phishing account and then try to get in touch with that researcher and then exploit the vulnerability before the right people are contacted. So this is a real problem. It sounds kind of ridiculous, but I see security researchers trying to get in touch with the right person at a website that has a critical vulnerability all the time, and they have no idea where they're supposed to get started because that is not a section on most people's marketing website, who to contact in the event of some sort of breach or issue or some other thing that a trained security person needs to know how to triage. So in this case, it allows you to put the information for who to contact directly into the security.txt file. And the example like who to contact is designed to allow security researchers to get in direct contact with the most expedient person who works in security or IT at that business to fix the problem. Again, this seems a little silly because you would think that it would be easy to find who to contact in the event of emergency, but it's actually super not. So this is great because, again, it prevents phishing where somebody who's asking publicly how to get in touch with, Hershey's security department, and instead a phishing person who has a compromised verified account could flip the profile to look like somebody who works there and be like, oh yeah, I'm that person. Please tell me all about all the problems in our company so that I can fix them. This is a real problem and it might potentially be fixed if more people start using the standard. Have you ever tried to report a vulnerability to a website?
No, it's generally hard in itself to find contact for anything on a website, let alone report one. And plus, you never know if they're going to take it the wrong way. So I kind of just keep that to myself.
Yeah, that's the problem. A lot of the time you'll reach out to somebody to explain a problem or a vulnerability and they will take it personally. Or it'll be someone who's a marketing person or salesperson who has no idea that it's serious. So they don't know who to send it to. You're wasting their time because you're talking to them about something they're not trained to handle. And frequently, yeah, the conversation doesn't go well, where somebody could come back and threaten legal action because they think that you're threatening them, when in fact, you're trying to fix something that's very critically wrong with their service. So I'm in big favor of this. I think it's great that it's been implemented. And if you run a website, you should consider having this as well.
Nice.
All right, over to you.
It's all up to me. Your fate is in my hands. All right. Cool. So NPM is back again with some more edgy news. So there's been some issues with NPM packages recently regarding protestware, but there's a new issue that's bringing some slight controversy back to NPM regarding the ability to add any developer or company as a maintainer to arbitrary NPM packages. So basically what a malicious actor could do is just spin up a malicious package that installs malware or something bad on a user's computer if it's installed. But they can add legitimacy to any of these repositories that they spin up by just being able to arbitrarily add random trustworthy accounts to their project and then just removing themselves. So it looks like it's a maintained project from some of these higher profile companies or well-known developers. So this researcher here, I can't find his name. I think it's Coda, created this test package here, which is Facebook NPM package just as a test repository, and was able to successfully add both Facebook and NPM themselves to this repository, removed himself from this package. And then it just stands here on the website looking like it's an officially maintained NPM package from these two credible sources. So obviously this can be used for some pretty bad stuff. And we've seen stuff like this happen on the NPM site before, where some repositories were using typo squatting in order to deliver malware to people that thought they were downloading a legitimate NPM package, but it actually installed malware on their computer. Yeah, so this was not good. And as you can see, Weeping Computer says this is a matter of reputation and not just security, since package planning can be abused.
Yikes. And this is not the first time that NPM has been in our news, even in the last month or two.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying there's a lot of controversy around this, because when it comes to like the ethics of like open source and stuff like that, and people that are putting out like protestware on the NPM site, which has been a recurring thing, as well as this, that's just not a great look.
All right, so over on my screen, we have a Microsoft report on some of the cyber attacks that have been going on in Ukraine. So what's interesting to note about these attacks is that they have increasingly been using wiper malware, which is like ransomware, only with no key. So it's designed to just destroy as many files as possible, and it really doesn't have any way to actually recover them once they are destroyed. It's also notable that a lot of these attacks, up to 40%, were against critical infrastructure. So we're talking about things that are not like military targets. They're basically civilian targets that would affect everybody in the country. So some of the attack vectors as well have been pretty standard things like phishing, unmitigated problems and vulnerabilities, that sort of thing. And then also compromising upstream providers. So sometimes if there is a third-party company that is serving a lot of these entities, it itself becomes the target of these spear phishing or other sorts of campaigns to target critical infrastructure and maybe shut down gas, power, or other sectors that would have really big repercussions for the country. So this report is fairly lengthy. You can check it out if you want. I've retweeted it, but it gives a little bit of insight into what it looks like to be at full-scale cyber war against a country. And in this case, the attacks have been relentless and not very targeted against military targets. They've been basically against any target that might have secondary effects on the military or government of Ukraine. So obviously a scary time to be a civilian in Ukraine when any sort of vulnerability in power system or any sort of equipment that might be outdated or unpatched for a long period of time is suddenly fair game for these more destructive styles of attack than we've started to expect from criminal groups that at least want to get paid. So, they're not going to destroy your data if they can charge you for it.
Trying to find the report, but I actually found it. There were something like 237 different cyber attacks that were specifically launched against Ukraine in the past 2 months, which I thought was crazy. And also, as you can see, there's a lot of very specific implementations of malware that were crafted for purposes of disinformation or ransomware or wipers or stuff like that that are targeting Ukraine. So there's, an alarming amount of attacks that are going on.
So speaking of disinformation, you don't need a cyber army to create a fake news story. And with the war in Ukraine, we've seen a lot of disinformation campaigns that have tried to take one side or the other or excuse one action or another by twisting or otherwise using information to incite public outrage. So I want to very briefly touch on a story of public outrage that you might have seen in the media. So excusing for the language.
Whoa.
Yeah, there was recently a story about Snickers taking an iconic part of their chocolate candy bars out in response to being, the PC and really representing how America is censoring things unnecessarily. And this was an obviously fake news story. In fact, the creator acknowledged that it was fake and had shared several other fake ones as well that had also gone viral. This is now has been covered by conservative media and is now in Rolling Stones, covering the way that this, as they call themselves, a shit poster, was able to make a completely fake news story go nationally viral. So I'm just, because the language in it, I'm just gonna go over this one very, very quickly. The key in this was, again, being able to put out a plausible seeming outrage story that hit all the right marks for shareability without very much fact checking involved. And because so many secondary organizations took up the story and spread it, so many people began to believe that it was real, that it actually took on a life of its own. So again, you don't need an army of cyber hackers in order to create fake news or propaganda or to get people really offended and riled up, because all you really need to do is put out a convincing enough shit post on Twitter.
Yeah, pretty nasty one at that.
Yeah, I know. All right, so speaking of nastiness, a study came out on how Amazon uses some of their products to target advertisements and the way that this information is shared. So what was most notable and kind of disturbing about this report is the fact that Amazon will go through and actually extract the text and meaning from a lot of the requests that you make to the server, and then will auction them to up to 40 different advertisers in real time in order to basically sell your data to the highest bidder. So this can include any command that gives them information about your interests, your activities, your family structure, how many people live there, where you live, all these sorts of things. Any preference is logged, meticulously extracted, and then shared with different advertising partners. And if you have one of these devices in your home, you might not be aware of how much information it is attempting to siphon and discern from all the different requests and all the different things that it hears. So while it was noted here that Amazon is not sharing raw voice transcriptions with advertisers, that's kind of sort of made it look like that in the story. That's not exactly what's happening here. Instead, it's taking your raw voice, processing it into text, and then extracting information from that in correlation with all the other text it's ever extracted. So it will go through and try to put what you said into context via everything else it's ever heard about you, and then sell the result of that to many different advertisers in an auction which strongly prioritizes and places a high price on this data. So because this data is so juicy to advertisers, it's real time, it's authenticated by a voice, it's like from a sensor basically placed in someone's home that they may have a high level of confidence in for using to do all sorts of ordering and stuff. These sorts of data rich profiles that Amazon then begins developing about you and then selling to advertisers are definitely a threat to privacy if you're worried about the kind of things that could slowly begin to learn about you and then sell that information to the highest bidder.
Yeah, that sounds like a load of pretext for, yes, we're still recording your voice and selling that information to people, but we don't want to make it sound that bad.
Yeah, exactly. We find evidence of Alexa skills directly communicating with advertising/tracking services. And note that Amazon's advertising partners sync their cookies with Amazon's and bid higher than non-partner advertisers. So it just looks like there's an ecosystem here to really get this data out to advertisers and tracking people, companies that are extremely opaque about their privacy policies. Most of them do not even have their privacy policies listed, which is of great concern, seeing as they're brokering essentially your data. So this report goes to really undermine a lot of the trust that Amazon has built in placing these smart speakers and sensors in people's homes.
Yikes.
Yeah. All right, over to you.
Cool. Well, did you know that VirusTotal itself is vulnerable?
What? Oh, well, that's not good.
Yeah, so apparently some researchers, I believe, over at Microsoft found a way to remotely execute code on the VirusTotal platform. So of course, if you haven't used VirusTotal before, the way this works is you're able to upload pieces of, well, if you receive a file or something that might look pretty conspicuous or that you might think has malware embedded in it, you can essentially just upload it to the site and it's able to profile whatever file you upload and compare this to commonly known virus strains and detect whether or not it might contain something malicious. But one of the ways that it does this is it has essentially different sandboxed environments that it can use in order to not only check the code, but possibly execute some of it. So these researchers determined that by encoding a déjà vu file, which is a file format that's used, it's a web file format that you can use to embed images, text, and stuff like that, kind of an alternative to PDFs. But basically, they were able to encode malware in base64 format into one of these déjà vu files, which they uploaded to VirusTotal. And one of the tools that's used in order to scan these files is EXIF tool, which is for basically peering into metadata from files. It looks at the EXIF metadata. So that's able to pull information from images or text files or stuff like that. But when it detects this specific metadata parameter, it actually executes this arbitrary command on the internal servers. And they were able to use this to enumerate various connected, whatchamacallit?
Servers?
Servers, VPS devices. They were able to sniff for open SSH ports and also open up a reverse shell directly on the VirusTotal machine, or platform rather.
Well, that
but
seems
it seems that
really
it's been patched
bad.
already.
I always kind of wonder though, like as a platform that's constantly being fed like the worst of the worst, like if anybody would bother to just go right to the source and just try to like get around being detected by just compromising VirusTotal itself, it seems like that's not as wild of an idea as I previously thought.
Yeah, you can see they also got access to like Kubernetes, container management stuff. They could sniff around at these Tor services and some other pretty bad stuff that they shouldn't have access to.
Wow. All right. Well, VirusTotal getting popped is definitely something I didn't have on my bingo card this week.
Yeah.
All right. Over on my screen, just a quick update. If anybody has an OMG cable, then the v2.5 firmware is now published along with API documentation. So if you want to use this very awesome Hack5 tool, which has been in the news a lot, using your own custom code, making calls to it, doing things that it previously wasn't designed to do, then that is now all possible. So very cool to see the web documentation on this out there for anybody who wants to take this Hack5 tool and make it a little bit more interesting. Be careful with the self-destruct command, though. Do you know what that does?
It's not a hardware self-destruct, but I think it just wipes whatever payloads you have installed on it, and also just destroys any evidence of it being a malicious device in case it's like gathered for forensic evidence or something. Yeah,
I think that it is a hardware self-destruct. So like
really?
It basically erases any sign that like there's anything in there at all. So it basically just turns it into a defect. It cuts the lines basically and becomes a defective USB cable with the hope that the target then just throws it away because it doesn't work anymore, which makes me so suspicious of every spontaneous USB cable that has just gone bad and that I've thrown away without investigating any further. Like, should I have? I don't know. It kind of makes me mad, actually.
I was thinking more to the extreme that it would just like blow itself up or something like that.
That would be your pen test isn't going well, so you're just like, forget it, just blow the computer. And then in your report, well, they plugged in an unknown USB cable, which destroyed the data center.
Whoopsie.
Obviously, your mistake.
I think Hack5 actually did a demo on that where they had like reverse capacitors or something in a USB and that self-destructed.
Yeah.
But yeah, this isn't that.
Yeah, so don't worry. Cool. Don't worry. You can safely test the OMG cable without worrying about it destroying the computer. But yeah, still seriously cool. And the ability to run these commands yourself via like WebSocket API requests is super awesome. And I think this is just great. And I would love to do something like this for the Wi-Fi Nugget when we have it out so people can write their own requests as well. All right, so some probably awkward conversations going on at the private equity company, which has taken control of NSO Group. So Alex, what is NSO Group again?
Oh God, are they state-backed? I know they do.
No, they're not state-backed.
Okay, I know there's some sort of rogue group that does malware or something like that.
Yes, so NSO Group is a private spyware company that mostly works with governments in order to, fight terrorism and stuff. But actually, their products have been repeatedly found to target diplomats, human rights defenders, and journalists who run afoul of people with lots of money and countries they control. So
I knew there was like some pretext there where they seemed official, but actually weren't.
Yeah. So because they claim to only, sell to governments that are fighting terrorism and whatever, they've kind of created this shield for themselves where they claim like, because we work with governments, we're allowed. But it turns out not all governments are ethical and not all of them follow the rules. And in this case, Citizen Lab was instrumental in finding out the different victims that have been affected by this and played a part in making sure that they were notified. So Citizens Lab is a Canadian-based group that tries to identify victims of these sorts of attacks, amongst many other wonderful things they do. But because this has been a focus of what they've done for the past couple of years, the group behind NSO Group has actually been conducting campaigns to attempt to discredit them in order to preserve NSO's reputation and try to roll back some of the work they've done, exposing all the really terrible things that this company has done. So what's interesting here is they went so far as to get in contact with George Soros, like the person who is directly funding Citizen Lab, and attempted to get him to defund Citizen Lab, actually after complaining about all the things that it was doing wrong. An organization unknown except for its attack on NSO. He questions the group's motivations, tactics, and objectives, which he describes as a little less pure than we might have hoped.
I think that can be applied to NSO Group. They've done questionable stuff.
Yeah, so they even went so far as to hire someone who had previously been working under somebody who worked at Citizen Group or Citizen Lab in order to try to get them to accept meetings and otherwise like get in contact with them when otherwise there's no way that they would have any sort of contact. So the attempts to discredit Citizen Lab were pretty extensive and really made for an unethical approach to dealing with the problem of this company they'd acquired's activity. So if you buy a company that sells spyware to oppressive dictators who then use it against journalists and human rights defenders, and then you try to clean up that reputation by going after the like civil rights groups that are discovering all the bad things that company's doing, might not be a very effective PR campaign when all that information is leaked. So because of some data law, I believe it was in the UK, all the information involving Citizen Lab was requested from the emails of this organization and then received, and that's how all this information came to light. So also, if you're going to run a shadow campaign to discredit a human rights group, maybe you shouldn't keep all the emails. Who knows? I'm not an expert, but neither, it seems, are these people. So that's just some more news about NSO Group this week. It seems like we talk about them every week. In this case, just kind of attempting to discredit the people who had found out some of the bad stuff they've been up to.
Oh no. After they've already been sued by some pretty high profile companies, I think, including Apple.
Yes.
Right?
Oh yeah, including Apple. All right, so also this one's going to be really brief, but if you're on macOS, update Zoom as soon as possible. The source on this, Patrick Wardle, a former NSA hacker known for his experience in hacking macOS computers. So you should probably update this very quickly. Do you guys remember back when like macOS computers were like not impervious to viruses, but everyone kind of thought they were? Those days are officially over. They are a huge target, and this is just another example of how, if you don't update your Mac, you could become the next victim of a very popular worm or spyware package that's in use by, I don't know, maybe NSO Group.
Thanks.
But I do not think that that is the group responsible for this one. I also love how opaque some of these notifications are. Security enhancements. But if Patrick Wardle is telling you you need to update immediately, then I imagine these security enhancements must be pretty substantial.
Yeah.
All right. Also, I don't know if you know what Audacity is, right?
Yeah, it's a sound manipulation program of sorts. You can listen to MP3s, edit them, whatever.
Yeah, so this is free. I don't like people on the Windows Store like might not have been aware of this because there were so many like versions of this on the Windows Store that were not free or offered limited functionality unless you paid like some random person. I mean, this is very, very clearly a scam. So I just have to give some credit to the developer of Audacity for publishing the real free version finally, so that people on the Microsoft Store stop getting scammed. And of course, this also could be a vector for spyware, adware, all sorts of other malicious things. Yeah, so this is a program I've used several times myself. I was amazed that there was a whole scam ecosystem around it in the Microsoft Store, but apparently that is all over.
That's funny. I think it's also open source, or at least source available, so it doesn't seem hard for
people to
people to just spin up their own version.
Yeah, exactly. Sucks, and then put gates on it, try to get like people to pay for it. Yeah, exactly. All right, so this is a story related to some of the things we've been talking about in Ukraine. So a number of different people had been using their private drones in order to do reconnaissance or other things in the war in Ukraine, which raised concerns that perhaps these people who were flying drones could be tracked back to where they were flying them and then hit with a piece of artillery or something. So originally DJI had said, no, this isn't possible because the telemetry here is actually encrypted. But it turns out that they're not. So this was raised as a concern and then immediately dismissed as something that wasn't technically possible. But it actually turns out that that is entirely possible. And this is something the company insisted on until finally somebody higher up at DJI was just like, you guys need to stop saying this because it's not true. So they doubled down on this for a good amount of time when the possibility was raised of tracking somebody back to their location. But in this case, you can see that, yes, they were able to potentially be tracked back to the origin of launch, and you were potentially able to eavesdrop on what the drone was seeing. So that is obviously bad if you are using a drone like this in wartime. All military drones are encrypted. You don't want your enemy knowing exactly where you're flying or looking over your shoulder. So the fact that these drones were able to be potentially viewed remotely is an incredible source of intelligence for anybody who might want to stop these sort of attacks, detect drones, or be able to eavesdrop on drone communications when they're in your area. All right, and then just a quick note on Cloudflare. They managed to thwart a huge distributed denial of service attack, which peaked at 15 million requests per second. And what was notable about this is yeah, this was done by a botnet, and botnets are pretty typically the ones responsible for this. But usually we see like IoT devices, printers, or other sorts of poorly secured network devices being responsible for this. In this case, that was not what was happening. In this case, there were actually servers, like server farms and data centers that were much more heavily involved in this attack, which was really weird. And you can see that the breakdown was Indonesia, Russian Federation, Brazil, India, Colombia, United States. It's kind of all over the place. But what's interesting is that these are no longer exclusively the domain of poorly secured networking devices like IoT devices. These are now often compromised services en masse from these from these sorts of data centers that can be able to send lots and lots of traffic. So by utilizing services hosted in data centers, it seems as though some of these attacks can be made more effective than using a distributed botnet of just, I don't know, infected routers or something like that. So interesting to note that this attack was successfully defended against, and also that so much of it was hosted out of data centers as opposed to the traditional kind of IoT platforms that are used for these sorts of botnets.
Dang.
Right? All right, over to you.
Cool. So a pretty nasty Linux vulnerability has popped up. And these issues are currently being tracked as Nimbuspwn, which encapsulates, I think, 3 different issues. So basically, the issue is rooted in the following component, which is network dispatcher, which is basically just a Linux daemon that sends connection status changes on Linux machines. But the architecture for this Linux utility seems to be, I wouldn't say primitive, but there are some checks that are usually implemented that weren't looked for when creating the software. Like, for instance, sanitizing the directory that's passed to one of the functions, which is run hooks for state. So basically, this should look for programs that should be executed with root privilege, but you can actually pass a directory with, you can basically append a directory that's like .. / whatever to this, and this will allow it to escape the current container it's running in and execute arbitrary code that's outside the scope of this program. And in addition to this, there was another issue that was discovered, or rather 2 other issues. Here you can see the directory traversal issue, which I just mentioned, where you could append these characters to allow it to escape from the base directory. And then there were 2 other issues that are slightly correlated: a symlink race issue, as well as a time of check, time of use race condition. So basically, this allows an attacker to create a symbolic link file that has the same name as a temporary file that the program would generate. So usually you can, well, since you're able to take a look at the source code for this, you can pretty much determine what the name of a temporary file it is that this program might spin up. And an attacker could spawn up their own temporary file with the same name that's actually a symbolic link to another file that contains malicious code. So when the program checks and tries to create the file that it's attempting to log to, it sees that it's already been created, but actually by the attacker. And since this symbolic link file points to another file that initially has root privileges, the program gets confused. It tries to write to this file, but then the attacker can switch this over to a different file and use this in order to stage malware or inject code into the executable. So this is pretty nasty.
It's very clever too.
Yeah. Symlink races are interesting. I got to read a little bit into them.
So somebody in the chat says, hey, Alex, can you answer my question under the white Wi-Fi Nugget post on Twitter? Ooh. And I'm there right now, and it just says, I happen to be on Twitter for a long time today, and I just saw this post, and I think this is my Wi-Fi Nugget. And if so, it looks really nice. Thank you. And greetings from Germany. That's not a question, but if you have a question, drop it in the chat, because I do see it, and we will answer it.
Is that the only question we got?
That's not a question, but I think perhaps they mean a different question that I didn't see. But I am trying, friend. I am trying to find your question.
There is only one white and black Wi-Fi Nugget that exists so far, so maybe that is yours.
Yeah, if you were the one that requested one, then that's your Wi-Fi Nugget, and it's been shipped, right?
Yeah.
Yep. All right. So over on my screen, we have Chinese hackers getting in on the, I'm not going to call it fun, the action in Ukraine by targeting Russian military personnel. So this is notable in that in the conflict in Ukraine, lots of different foreign agencies want to know what's going on the ground. And because they might not have initial access themselves, they're relying on some of this cyber warfare techniques to be able to break in and get the information themselves. So what's interesting is that a lot of these documents have been targeted towards people who might have experience on the Chinese border. So the attack chain starts with a malicious executable named, I'm not even going to try to pronounce this, but it's a border detachment that is primarily like Chinese border detachment area, again, across the Russian-Chinese border. So presumably this is targeting Russian soldiers who would be active in that area, or at least familiar with it. So this is a pretty sophisticated attack, and this is also a group that has been linked to China in the past, also known as Nomad Panda, aka Red Foxtrot. But I've also seen, I think I've seen this group called like Mustang Panda too as well. There's just so many like silly names for this particular group, but they seem pretty serious about getting some sort of access to information about what's going on in Ukraine. And in this case, it looks like they're willing to do some pretty sophisticated cyber espionage in order to do it. So if you've also been hit with the Onyx ransomware, you should be aware that it might not be worth it to pay that ransom, especially because it appears that this ransomware is not actually ransomware. It is behaving as a wiper. So what that means is that this ransomware is actually automatically destroying any file larger than 2 megabytes instead of encrypting it, which means that even if you were to pay the ransom, there's no physical way that you would actually be able to get your data back because the software is just destroying it. So the technical functionality of the Onyx ransomware wasn't known until fairly recently, but as soon as they were able to find a sample of it and decrypt it, it looks as though it's pretty obvious here that it is not something that's going to allow you to get your data back. So unfortunately, if you were hit by this ransomware, your data is gone, but fortunately you don't have to pay the ransom, or at least you shouldn't, because it won't do anything. All right, and then there was some documentation on an interesting breach at GitHub where attackers were able to use stolen OAuth tokens to go after lots of organizations and actually add themselves to their private repositories and then start cloning them. So this was possible because somebody gained access to stolen OAuth tokens through Heroku and Travis CI. What is that?
It's management for software stuff. I don't actually know. I used it like once.
Good. I mean, your context clues are great, so that's better than mine. But they were able to use these stolen tokens to get into any account that was authorized with Heroku or Travis CI OAuth token interaction. So as soon as they were able to locate an organization that had this integration, then they were able to use it to basically get in, add themselves to these private repositories, and then what was interesting about this attack also is it seemed highly targeted. Once they added themselves, they would scan around a bit and try to find interesting or high-level organizations or access that they could really use, and then go after those specifically. So this wasn't going after everything. This was using initial access to go after more targeted accounts, which was what was kind of notable about it. So more details can be found in the write-up on this that GitHub has produced, but the high level is just that, yeah, these organizations had OAuth tokens that were able to be abused then let in through unauthorized integration, which allowed a lot of unauthorized data access, unfortunately. All right, you got anything else?
Yeah.
Oh boy.
This is the last piece I have.
All right.
But,
the name is giving me stress. Emotet again.
Emotet malware. Yeah, they've appeared for a lot of whack stuff, but their most recent campaign, or actually their most recent development, was they launched a 64-bit version of their malware, which allowed them to effectively ramp up the number of attacks that they were able to successfully get by like antiviruses and stuff like that, just because they weren't used to this new version of Emotet. But their most recent phishing campaign via email actually fell kind of flat because they messed up a part of their code that referenced like a directory or a file that they were trying to write to that just didn't exist. So they sent out a whole bunch of emails pretending to be Word documents. And essentially these were supposed to steal various files from the users, embed malware and stuff like that. And the way that Emotet works is it's usually used as sort of a platform or a launch pad for other malware to be installed. Like, for example, I think they were doing like TrickBot for a while and some other types of like ransomware and stuff like that. But basically this one fell kind of flat because they screwed up a line in their source code, which researchers were able to determine after reverse engineering their recent epoch for malware. But this was quickly fixed, and they're back up again, sending up more spam emails to various users. But in good news, this software was developed by the Japanese Computer Emergency Response Team, which is called Emotet, that allows you to easily detect this new 64-bit variant of the Emotet virus. And this also works on Windows, and you can use this to automatically detect if this has been installed on your servers or computer or whatever. So yeah, you might want to check that out if you're a system administrator and you're wary of Emotet.
All right, so we're almost out of time, but I'm going to go through these last couple stories pretty fast. So first up is cybersecurity agencies, including the NSA, have revealed some of the most exploited, well, I guess the most exploited they're willing to talk about, vulnerabilities of 2021. And some of these are Log4Shell. It's Log4Shell. That's appears to be number one. But also we have things in Zoho Manage Engine, Microsoft Exchange Server, a lot. Most of these featuring proxy shell or proxy logon, and then also the zero logon vulnerability. So some of these vulnerabilities don't even have names. How sad for them. But they are focusing on things like Microsoft Exchange Server, Fortinet, Pulse Secure, and Atlassian. So interesting to note what kind of exploits are getting the most bang for their buck when it comes to attackers using these, because these are the ones that have been tried and true ways of getting into systems, performing escalations, and doing all sorts of other damage to an organization.
If that Log4Shell thing is still around, I actually have this quick piece of news pulled up on just how, I guess, the public eye is sort of complacent about Log4j now, and it's not really like as much of an issue as far as most people are concerned, because they think it's been like patched and fixed and everything. But according to Google's open source insights, there's currently 17,840 open source packages that depend on Log4j as a dependency, but only 7,000 have been patched. And there's a whole bunch of just servers that are spun out there that are still using vulnerable versions of Log4j, like in the thousands, and various software packages that depend on Log4j that just haven't been updated. Yikes. So this is still very much a real and relevant issue.
Yeah, I mean, there was a time where like Log4j was just a way to like rattle something and see if it had Log4j in it, or the exploit was a way of just checking to see if there's somewhere inside this binary running Log4j. And nowadays, hopefully a lot of this has been patched, but again, a lot of it still hasn't.
Yeah.
All right, so over on my screen, really the most vulnerable being hit again. The American Dental Association was hit by Black Basta ransomware. And it seems as though they were trying to just kind of say that this wasn't so bad on their website. It said, the ADA is experiencing technical difficulties. We appreciate your patience and are working to get systems running smoothly. Not like at all, but smoothly. You might notice the stark difference between shut down all computers now. So privately to their members, they were a little bit more stark about what was going on. Technical issues. We apologize for the inconvenience as we continue to experience technical difficulties on our website. At this time, you cannot register for events or pay your duties. Stay tuned for more information. All right, well, that's looking a little worse. But now it's looking like they are potentially also having NDAs and other sorts of information leaked by this ransomware group. So the threat actor, let's see, 2.8 gigabytes is what the threat actors have said that they've stolen. And that's apparently 30% of the data stolen in the attack. Okay. Oh, right. Okay. All right. So I was like, 2.8 gigabytes isn't that much. But if they stole, a little bit more than that, like roughly 10 gigabytes, that's a little bit more. So the Dental Association has also been privately telling their members that this is pretty bad and it is not looking good. But it is still yet to be established the total fallout for this attack against, again, our most precious American Dental Association. We also have in the line of precious companies, Coca-Cola potentially being hit by a data breach. This is still not completely confirmed, as the group involved in this is really more kind of like a, I guess it would be more like a data extortion group than a ransomware group, because they haven't actually been shown to be deploying ransomware. They're just stealing it. They're stealing the data and then turning around and threatening to leak it and demanding money in order to not do that. So
they're going to reveal the Coke recipe.
That's what I'm saying. But it seems as though, there is some confidential data there that maybe Coca-Cola would want, like for example, like maybe all the information about all their employees or something that would affect people or their suppliers or something like that. So it is very unfortunate if that is true. However, again, They have not acknowledged any data has been stolen, and this ransomware group has not really established themselves after they had claimed to have breached another Epic Games as their first victim. In this case also, they never ended up leaking any data, so it's not entirely certain whether or not they're legitimate or if they are really stealing the data in the first place. All right, so Google Play Store is now also allowing apps to still collect data, but now they have to tell you about exactly what data they are taking. So this is notable because a lot of the time when you accept an application, you're not aware of what kinds of data it is taking off of your device and potentially sharing. So here you can see a mock-up of what this sort of information is going to look like. So you can see the information of your approximate location and even your precise location, and your personal information is shared with advertisers and analytics. So that is obviously not great if you don't want them knowing your exact location all the time and selling it to advertisers. So this gives a little bit more transparency into what types of data are being sold about you if you're interested in somebody developing a data profile on you. So the current way of doing this is you have to go into the app, click on additional information, and then hopefully the developer has a privacy policy you can click on in order to learn more information. And this is not transparent at all, because if you're installing an application, you're probably not going to go through all the steps in order to see this. But by having this pop up as soon as you install the app, it still allows these apps to collect the data they need, but now they have to justify it to the user in this manifest that people see before making the decision. And it is noted that Apple's been doing this for a while now. Nice. And I've noticed this because after I got a iPad, I tried installing things on it, and I was interested to see that, yeah, they are much more transparent about what types of data are being taken off the device and where it is going.
Yeah, that's good. I don't like getting just like the vague pop-ups that are like, we need access to your contacts for reasons.
Yeah.
Your microphone for reasons and your internal data.
Yeah, because otherwise the app won't work. It's like, why? All right, so seems as though North Korean hackers are targeting journalists with some novel malware believed to be specifically focused on journalists who focus on North Korea or otherwise could have sources that are useful for them. This is generally an attempt to gain access to confidential information, investigations, and other sorts of data that the North Koreans might be interested in, but it was sent out by a compromised South Korean account that was associated with the former director of National Intelligence Services. So they had previously compromised this account. They sent it out to highly targeted journalists, and then they had something referencing the North Korean Minister of Mining Industries, which was sent out as the bait here. So like the journalists thought they were getting something about this big important person in South Korea, but instead they were getting infected with gold backdoor via fantasy. So the process here was, in this case, you open the zip file. It in Pro has a .link file or INK file.
I think that's link. It's like a library for Windows, I believe.
Yeah, and then drops a PowerShell like payload. So it opens up a legitimate document while that PowerShell payload is doing a dropper, which is called a fantasy dropper, injects the shellcode, and then you have a backdoor on the target. So just interesting that North Korea continues to be so persistent against critics around the world, but journalists are often a target of this sort of thing, which is why they need to be very careful when opening these sorts of documents. All right, and then last up, Google is offering a 50% bonus to anybody finding bugs in Android 13, the beta version. So if you are a bug hunter and you want to get a sweet payout, they're paying a maximum payout of $1.5 million for full remote code execution, exploit chains on the Titan M chip used in Google Pixel phones running Android 13 beta. So of course there are some carve-outs there. It has to be using their hardware. It has to be using the Android 13 beta build, which is a little lame because if you wanted to do this just on like Android Studio or something, then it looks like you actually do need to use their hardware in order to test it out against their Titan M chip. But I mean, for $1.5 million, you could buy a couple of those probably. So if you specialize in Android hacking and you're interested in this sort of thing, then it looks like this is a great time to get started with it because yeah, they're paying out big for anything involving Android 13 beta. All right, so that's all the time we have for today. Thank you to everybody who's in the chat asking questions and commenting on the stories. And if you have any questions about anything that we've covered, or if you're watching on repeat, you can always leave a comment and we will make sure to answer it on our live Q&A streams, which we do every Wednesday now. So on our last Q&A stream, we had Darren Kitchen on as well as Mike, who does Kismet, as well as some of the new improvements on the Wi-Fi Pineapple that we got to discuss. And that was super cool. So you can check out our live stream on Wednesday if you want to see us on Hack 5, maybe have a special guest on and ask questions and get them answered in real time. So big shout out, of course, to Veronis for letting us to continue to do this stream, which is really fun. And also shout out to everybody in the chat for just being here with us and getting to check in with us at the end of the week. Lots of fun to talk to all of you. And yeah, Alex, thanks for being here.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
All right. We'll see you all next week. Have a good one.